All right, guys, the camera is on. The session is live. Welcome, everybody. I have online with me Joe Jackson from Sprinkler Supply, Dave Hawks and Chris Hull from BYU, and we will be doing some Smart Water Wednesdays this morning. So thanks for joining us, and I am super excited to look at advanced OptiFlow. We're going to get started right at the top of the hour, so we just have some getting to know you time before we officially get started to let everybody log in and get settled. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce my old friend, Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson, how you doing this morning?
Doing great, Ben. Glad to be part of this. Excited to share my experience with advanced OptiFlow solutions.
I couldn't think of a better candidate. Thank you for making time.
Of course.
Chris Hull. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Good. You look like you're bundled up and warm. Is it cold in Salt Lake?
Yeah, storm's coming in, so hopefully we're going to get some good snow out of this one. So
nice. Yeah, we're fingers crossed. We can use all that snow. Any snow we can get, right?
Yeah, we're about 150% snowpack right now, so we're sitting pretty. So,
but I'm still reading about the lack of water in the Great Salt Lake. So, anything we can do. Dave Hawks, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Ben. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. Thanks for making time. Chris Hull, or wait, first, Dave Hawks, I have to cuss you first. I am making slides, and I usually zoom to LinkedIn and steal people's pictures from LinkedIn, and I didn't get one from you. So
I'm sorry.
I had to Google you. We get candid shots of you. That's okay.
Did you find me?
I'm an expert Googler.
Now I'm nervous.
No, it was BYU's newsletter, I think.
Oh, even worse.
Chris Hull, I have some questions for you as well. In all of my research steps, I was looking at BYU, and I found this awesome kind of award that BYU gives out. Can you tell me a little bit about the competency award?
Yeah, so there's an award they give out to an individual that's done something to provide a service, and it could be meet customer expectation. This one was for competency, kind of going out of their way, doing their job to accomplish something and make campus better.
Nice. Sounds like high recognition. Do you know anyone who has won that award recently?
Yeah, we had a little award ceremony this morning, and Dave's the one that was.
Congrats, Dave.
Dave Hawks, congratulations. That's awesome. Can you tell me what you won your award for?
I just made people feel good and warm and fuzzy inside. So all while pretending to work.
All while pretending to work. All while delivering a little water management.
That's right. Yeah.
If that's your idea of pretending, more people need to pretend, it sounds like, Dave. So
you know what? I just play a lot. I've got an awesome job. So there's a lot of play, and occasionally I work. So
have fun working. Yeah. That's awesome.
And then before we get started, can you tell us your official title and role with the university? Dave, let's start with you.
Chris, what is my title? I think I'm an Irrigation Specialist, Supervisor. I do what Chris tells me to. He's my supervisor, but he is nice enough to let me do a lot of water management and irrigation scheduling. I do a lot of maintenance and repairs on everything water features, canals, pump stations, lots of fun stuff. So
nice. Chris, what do you do for the university?
So I would be titled as the Irrigation Manager or Supervisor. So I oversee all the installation, maintenance on campus, and I get to work with great guys like Dave. And really, it's a team. It's a team thing, and that's what I really like about Dave. It's not about individuals; it's about working together as a team and accomplishing more. And trying to be involved as much as we can as far as WeatherTRAK goes. I think the more people you have involved, the more input we have to make it better.
So, amen to that. Amen to that. Joe Jackson, I know that you are a salesman, but can you quickly define your relationship with BYU and how you play a role in this conversation?
Yeah, so I've been working with BYU for a lot of years. Worked with them on their previous control system, helping with that. And as they were realizing that they need better control or more tools, I was able to talk with them about WeatherTRAK and OptiFlow and being able to manage one point of connection across multiple controllers and multiple main lines and just really dial it in to get the most efficient scheduling based off of the available watering. So go way back with BYU, worked with them for a lot of years.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we are right here at the top of the hour. So thank you guys. Nice to meet you again. And I hope that if you have questions for Joe or Chris or Dave, you can throw them in the chat box. We will try and get to those questions as efficiently as time allows. So with no further ado, I want to kick this guy off. Give me 2 seconds. We will share my screen here. And we will start the official content called Customer Success Story, BYU, and Advanced OptiFlow. So the slideshow does a lot of what we've already talked about in the unofficial session. We first of all introduce my friend Joe Jackson, who runs the water management division for Sprinkler Supply Company out of Salt Lake City or West Jordan, Utah. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Ben.
And then you might recognize my friend Joe because not only has he been a frequent co-host and guest on Smart Water Wednesdays, but he also won our dropped tournament. He is the first official dropped champion. So that just means that he is a certified WeatherTRAK nerd, just like me. So
proud of that.
All right, and today's special guests, we have the cream of the crop from the BYU irrigation team. Chris Hull is, I found Irrigation Specialist. I'm sorry, I botched the title there, Chris. How are you doing this morning, Chris?
Good. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for making time.
Yeah.
And Dave Hawks, who we have the candid photo of. Dave, good morning.
How are we doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm excited to be here, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making time. I'm excited to talk about this. Now, I do have to frame today's conversation just a little bit for the listeners out there. Today's conversation is advanced OptiFlow. So we are going to take a deep dive into the capabilities of OptiFlow and what an advanced user looks at when they're using the OptiFlow system, some of the solutions on an advanced system that OptiFlow can provide and make managing complex irrigation systems much easier. In every demonstration I've ever done up until this point, I have only covered the surface level. I only do demonstrations about the simple OptiFlow configurations and how a nice, neat little OptiFlow system works, right? That's what you'll see at our official Learn Upon site where we have OptiFlow learning content. We do a very simple demonstration of what a simple configuration looks like in that setup. So check that out. It's free if you want to talk about basics. Another place to look if you want to talk about basics is our YouTube channel. We've got a lot of great content on kind of new level user OptiFlow discussions. In fact, my friend Joe Jackson was the guest speaker on this OptiFlow Part 1 optimization. That was when we were first getting started with Smart Water Wednesdays. So check us out there. If you aren't experienced with OptiFlow, definitely start there because what we are going to do today is not basics. It is jump to the deep end of the OptiFlow pool. And we are going to talk about how BYU really immerses themselves in OptiFlow management and some of the kind of key things that I think users need to know along the way that are really advanced features, but might touch any user, might touch any system that we have. All right. That is enough intro. Let us jump out of this guy. Boom. And back to you. Let's start with my first question. OptiFlow with no flow sensors. Okay. OptiFlow with no flow sensors, it seems like juxtaposition. It feels like something that we shouldn't have, but it is something that is my most common example when I'm talking about BYU's solution, right? BYU does a lot of OptiFlow and does a lot of their OptiFlow without flow sensors. Who wants to start? Chris Hull, do you want to start by telling me how you run OptiFlow without a flow sensor?
Yeah, so just kind of give you some background. We started in 2019 where we reinstalled our first WeatherTRAK controller. And so we started off with no flow sensing whatsoever. And I don't even believe we had OptiFlow at the beginning, but it was almost impossible with the water sources that we have to track what we were using. And kind of what you've always said is you can't measure what you don't.
You can't manage what you don't measure.
That's right.
There you go.
And so the thing is that we always have somebody on campus. Somebody's always here. So if there's an emergency that goes awry, that somebody can come and take care of it. But, if you're not tracking that flow, then obviously you don't know what you're using. So that was the hard part, is just not having that metered so that we can understand what we're using. And then by implementing flow meters, we can't track any history from that. But yeah, from going off the OptiFlow pages, we take those water sources that we do have, and then we just manually enter all that data. So that was originally the big part, is to try and get all that data from the old central control system and put it into WeatherTRAK. And so we would all manually enter all those flows. And so whether you're tracking like valve size or counting up each nozzle and then tracking how much flow is going into that zone, and then entering all those numbers in there, and then creating your hydraulic tree and creating flow zones that are attached to that water source.
Right. It's all a process. So that a lot to unpack there. My two big questions you just answered in that. First of all, I was going to ask first of all, when you're using OptiFlow, the key thing for OptiFlow scheduling, not alert management or anything like that, but for the OptiFlow to generate schedules, every station needs to have its own flow value. Okay. That's the heart of OptiFlow, is we know how many gallons per minute every station uses and how many gallons per minute your main line can use. And we balance the two to keep your main line running at its efficient capacity, right? And so knowing station flow values is a essential part of that kind of conversation. What you see here, there's two ways that WeatherTRAK can get there, right? We can either learn flow and just run a learn flow test if you have a flow sensor, or what Chris and BYU have done in many cases is gone through and manually entered flow values that provide us the information we need for OptiFlow. In this case, we won't be managing alerts, right? We won't be looking for station high flow alerts, but we will know that station 1 here runs at 16 gallons a minute and use that number to balance our OptiFlow schedule. Joe, anything to add on to that explanation?
I think you nailed it. With those two pieces of the puzzle, without a station flow, OptiFlow doesn't know what to do. And I've had customers that have not had a flow and that station does not get scheduled. So whether it's learned through a learned flow or it's user entered, that data has to be there. And the more accurate the data, the more efficient your system is going to be. And then that second component, what is your capacity on the pipe that's supplying that program or that zone? You have to have that capacity identified so it knows how many stations it can run without exceeding capacity.
Right. Absolutely. Dave Hawks, anything to build on for us?
Yeah, just you went to the right page. One thing I wanted to add to what Chris had said is, as we're adding all this information, most of our water's coming is secondary water out of canals or pipelines now. We're working with 4 different pump stations on campus that are boosting the pressure. So as we're watching OptiFlow, we're also jumping over and we're watching our pumps and our pump stations to make sure that we're not maxing those out or overworking those. And it's been awesome. The OptiFlows, flow meters are a lot better, but OptiFlow without flow meters is definitely, it's 1,000 times better than just your standard scheduling. So
can you tell us why you didn't have flow sensors to begin with?
You know what, that goes back to a decision long before Chris and I existed. And we're working on changing that.
Totally. But as now I didn't hear this from you. I just heard it through the rumor mill. But as I heard it, the system that you manage has such large pipes at certain points that it makes it difficult to manage flow on the existing system. And part of the challenge that you're facing now is figuring out where you can fit those in. Is that sound right?
Yeah. We've, for the most part, the big pipes are up close to the pump station. Smaller ones are close to the valves, but there are places where it jumps. And so building this hydraulic tree has really allowed us to see kind of where our water constraints are and where, if there's areas or infrastructure we need to work on to improve that. So
that is great. Joe Jackson, Dave just opened up our second question that I know is the one that you most often talk about for BYU, and that is how critical it is that OptiFlow manages the source number and manages the amount of add-in gallons right at the very first step of irrigation. Can you talk to me a little bit about how, A, why that's important, and B, how that helped with BYU?
You bet. So BYU, they've got a very unique setup. They actually have multiple OptiFlow sites. The one that is the most complex is the Upper East pump station. I believe, is it 22 inch? Is that the size coming off the pump station, Chris?
20 inch.
20 inch.
Yeah.
Yep. So they got a 20-inch pipe. They've got a lot of water that could come through it, but depending on the time of year, that doesn't mean that's how much they are pulling through it. But with that in mind, you've got this large number of water. You've got this complex network of piping, and how efficient things are downstream is dependent on how accurate the number you have that you're working with. So with that 20-inch pipe and then breaking down to smaller pipes as it networks throughout campus and across that OptiFlow configuration, it really helps determine on how efficient they're able to run even something that's as small as a 2-inch branch that comes off of it, because we have to have all the piping ahead of that, above that on the tree accurate. And BYU's done a very, very, very good job of that. Once we have that network built out, then we add what we've already talked about. We add those station flows, and OptiFlow does all the work from there. It is going to optimize from that smallest main line or flow zone that's identified back up the tree to the available water supply that's been identified at the source.
Absolutely. Chris or Dave, do you have anything to build on that?
Yeah, so we have the 20-inch main line that comes in, but obviously we're not going to use that whole main line. So we can take that flow and we can put a number in there and tack that down so we're not, doing an over capacity on that main line.
I call that overtaxing is what I call that.
Yeah. So and we obviously had to watch those flows because there's a lot of different shareholders on the canal, and the way it is that we do have 4 different pump stations on campus, but where the canal originates, it comes off of the Provo River, and then it comes through a diversion, and then it splits off and goes into two different canals. So we have to manage both of those canals at the same time and understand the flows in order to not, overtax it.
And the way that I understood it was we were involved with BYU at the very beginning, and foundationally, we wanted to make this a good solution for you. And unnamed predecessor, the system that you had beforehand, could not manage that source number. And from what I hear tell, we were pulling more water off of that drainage ditch than it could provide, and we were sucking that ditch dry, and people downstream were mad. Do you remember that story at all?
Yeah, so the way the central control worked before is it did separate sites, and separate sites couldn't communicate with each other. And so that's what OptiFlow provided, is to be able to, use that one source and then talk to each controller over that given site, and then give us access to manage that flow across the whole site on campus.
That's amazing.
Chris,
Dave, anything to add? Oh, go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
I was just going to say, how has your available water changed with the drought over the last few years?
So in 2021, that's when the drought had really gotten really severe. And so we had somewhere between 80% capacity the first of the season. Then towards the end, they tagged us back to about 70-80% of capacity. And so we went into OptiFlow and changed those flow numbers to try and match that, because we'd only have so much flow that we could use at a given time. And so, during the drought, it's been very helpful just to tack in that flow of as far as what we were supposed to be using.
Let me just be clear on what I just heard you say. Did I just hear you say that as drought hit and the production of those irrigation ditches got lower and lower, you changed that source number to rectify that, right? Is that what happened?
That's right. So where we would have maybe 1,200 gallons a minute, where that would be our flow, depending on how much we were allocated. And then attacking that down, say anywhere from 500 to 700 gallons a minute, then you could put that number in there, and then you would be able to source it at that capacity.
That's awesome. Dave, we've talked a lot about this. Well, I'm going to close it out. You have anything to talk about source?
One thing the OptiFlow really has helped us with is, we've been talking about the irrigation, the secondary water side and the pump station. I was looking this morning, I was curious. We've got a total of like 65 total connections on campus, and OptiFlow can incorporate all of those into one big tree, and it just manages that water window so well. And it's so easy for Chris and I as managers to adjust schedules to campus needs. It's just incredible how powerful OptiFlow really is.
Can you talk a little bit about just expand on the management of OptiFlow and how that makes it easier for you, like how that advanced scheduling saves you time?
Once you put in that kind of that front end work to build your hydraulic tree so that, you know what your sources of water are. So you know what your allotment is, what your gallons per minute. A lot of these smaller sources are culinary, so we've got a 1 or a 2 or maybe a 3-inch backflow in places that are, once you build that tree out, you can, like Chris said, if we get restrictions, we can go to that source and we can just tack that number down to meet, what the city or what the water owner wants us to do. And OptiFlow recalculates everything for us. We don't have to go through and change 1,000 different schedules, and spend days or weeks doing it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of a half hour really. And, we're just about that good to go. So.
And another interesting thing with this is where they primarily are on secondary water, In the spring and the fall, there are times where there is no water in the canal, and so they have to hook into their city water supply, which is definitely not 1,200 gallons a minute.
Interesting.
And so being able to change your source number again to match your culinary supply, where before it was according to the allotment on the secondary supply, I know has been a time saver as well.
Yeah, and that's incredibly common against my user experience, right? Is folks who have a secondary water option don't often have the full season of a secondary water option, right? That there has to be some sort of switch. That's awesome. That's a great observation. All right. So this takes us to the main event. What I really wanted to talk about, and let me just bring this guy up because I just showed it off before I could set it up correctly. But I want to show off what OptiFlow looks like on WeatherTRAK.net for an advanced system like this. And I want to kind of go through one of their examples. In this case, we'll call it the Upper East Pump Station, and talk about how they program the OptiFlow, what sort of challenges that they saw, and how this advanced configuration helps them tack down and make long-term management simple. So Joe, I want you to kind of kick us off and set this up for us, because I know you were there at the very first step.
Yeah, so as you scroll up to the top of that, you'll see the supply, the source. Just pull our slider up there on the right-hand side. Perfect. Upper East Pump Station. And then as you scroll down, you're going to see this one. This is set up with a flow zone. Everything has been set up with flow zones because there was no main line. Main lines have a flow sensor and master valve associated with them. But OptiFlow has the option of going with a flow zone instead, which allows you just to manually enter key flow values to help with the optimization process. So as we go through this, you can see 1-inch supplies coming off of the Upper East Pump Station, 2-inch, 3-inch, you scroll all the way down and you're going to see all of the different water supplies and different areas where they're pulling off of this Upper East Pump Station mainline network. And below each of those, you're going to see that you do have different flow values assigned with the different column submains. And with this is how this is built. I know a lot of hours, and Dave alluded to this, I know a lot of hours have gone into putting this together so that they know what programs or what stations get their water from which water supply, which then works its way back up to the source. Quite the complex. Ben, if you hit expand there next to collapse, and you can see that just there right above Upper East Pump Station, you've got your little expand button that expands everything.
This guy?
Slide
Go to the top right there.
Right there, if you hit expand, that expands the whole thing. And Ben can scroll for days showing the complexity of the
Break
network.
this down just real quick. Tell me what I'm seeing: blue, gray, and white.
Blue's water supply. Oh, actually, sorry, blue is, I guess you'd say water supply. It's which is tied to the Upper East Pump Station main supply. And then your atrium is your flow zone, which is going to have a program or a station tied to that specific flow zone. So it's the hydraulic tree and basically the parent-child relationship between who I am as a station and where I get my water from.
And then under that?
And then under that, that shows that station with its associated flow rate or program, depending on how you have it set up. You can, with OptiFlow, you can either assign a program to a flow zone or mainline, or you can do station assignment as well, just depending on the complexity of your setup.
So here we see that there's 2 stations on this section of the system that we're talking about.
Correct, with the largest flow rate being 22 gallons a minute. And that works because the flow rate for the atrium was set at 23. Nice. So we know that we have enough water to run the largest station on that.
Hey, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
So just to point out, all of these 1 and 2 inch that you're seeing right there, these are all individual points of connections. what we've done is if a controller is on a has secondary water, it goes under that site, like this Upper East site. But some of these have two different points of connections. And that's why you see that, this first one right there only has 2 stations on it. There's 34 other stations on that controller that are coming from secondary water. That's why you see things so small right here. If you scroll down and we get into the 6 and the 8-inch lines, you're going to see a lot more building, because that is what's coming from the pump station actually and on the secondary water.
20-inch
right
main
there.
campus line.
Yeah, so that's what's coming out of, that's the pump station right there. And then you see everything building, dropping into there. So
That's awesome. All right. So I don't care who takes this, Dave or Chris. I want you to start me at the beginning, walk me through the lot. I'm going to collapse all this and expand as you want. Start me at the very beginning logic and start me at the source and walk me through this.
Yeah, so kind of what Dave alluded to is just on you're gonna build a site. So the site for this one's Upper East Pump Station. And so on that.
So we're clear. I don't mean to interrupt, but you see that BYU has taken time to take their campus and break it into subsets that they call different sites. So I thought that was cool. So that's where we start.
Yeah, so you start with that Upper East site, and then you put everything inside that site that would go under that. So any water source that you have. So you might have separate water sources off a city supply, which we're looking at right there. 1-inch atrium is a separate source. The parking garage would be a separate source. So you'd have 1-inch, anywhere from 1-inch, 2-inch. And one thing that we did on these is, as a description for a source, is we would also put the line size. And that's just help distinguish, if we're going in there and changing numbers, then we know what to, if we're reduced on allocation and we change those numbers, then we can go back through and change that to the right flow according to the line size.
Right.
And so also on that, we'd have the 20-inch main line coming off the canal. So if we scroll down.
Scroll down this guy.
Right there. Yeah, so you see the 20-inch main line. So right now I have it at 350, and that's because we had to switch to the backup in the fall.
And that sets right here. Boom.
That's right. So because the weather was such that ET was really low, we were running a lot of water. So I could run that at 350. And I could up that because I have an 8-inch backup main line. But the way that I did it is I put 350 in there. And I made that, when you go into optimize, you can make that flow last 350 gallons a minute, and you can make it go from 7 until 7 in the morning. Instead of having like a huge peak at night where you would do, if you had like 700 in there, then you'd have a huge peak at like, say 10 o'clock until 2, where you could run it, you could shorten your water window that way. But if you have a water window that's extended, then you can incorporate that flow in there so that you can establish how long you want that water to run.
Yeah, to your earlier point, right? We don't want to use all 20 inches of that main line all at the same time. We want to make use of the time that we have. We don't want it all going down as fast as it can in every case, right? In some cases we do, but not in this one. That's
right. And so on some controllers, we might have stations that are attached to the 20-inch main line, but we might also have them attached to the city, a 1 or 2-inch supply off the city, and then you can go in there and you can attach those stations to that flow zone according to which supply it's off of.
So I think this is interesting because you can see it all right here, right? You can see it start at 350. That's your big number. And then you choke it down to the 8-inch. And that's where you start adding your stations. And that's where you start managing. So you don't get that 350 number. Any one main line is only responsible for the gallons that it produces. And you can change the times that those run. Any program has its own start time and water window.
Yeah, and sometimes you won't have a lot of good. I mean, some people have good as-builts, and we have a good system that we use AutoCAD, and we have a good system where we can take as-builts and then we know what sizes there. Sometimes we have to go out and verify that. And then sometimes when we're doing renovations, we run into situations where we find out, this isn't a 2-inch line, it's a 3-inch. So then we can put those numbers in there and adjust it accordingly.
Nice. So it's flexible enough to put it in once and then change it as you verify the reality out there, right?
That's right.
That's awesome. Joe, you want to build on what Chris just said?
I've just seen over the years working with them as they've utilized OptiFlow more and more, just how many situations it's able to help them manage better. They've got a practice field area, or the sports area there just west of the stadium, that gets a ton of use, and they have to fit it all in. If you keep pulling up to the top there, Ben, now go to the west, go to the left.
Let me just back out.
Yeah, they've got right there to the left, a little bit more. Right there, that area there gets a ton of use by just scheduled extracurricular sports activities. The students love it there. And I know in over the years they've had a really short window where they can get a big majority of the watering going down, and they've made changes over the years too to help optimize that with the scheduling. But with OptiFlow, I know working when they first adopted it, that they had to take and try and get it all done Saturday afternoon through Monday morning for the majority of it. And that's where that number, it helps out, putting that, they could maximize the main line, but then they had to shrink the water window, like Chris said, and they had to cut the usage like in half, because they had to fit what they could within, dark. Did they put lights up on that one, Chris? Do they have lights on that one now?
They do.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is it? Kids are there sometimes till 11 o'clock, midnight, getting use.
Yeah, we could have camps at 6 in the morning, and then they could be out there until 10, 11 at night. So
yeah. And it's a big grass area. They've got quite a bit going on there. And that's an old picture, as you can see.
Yeah.
There's more grass out to the west now.
Oh,
so,
like here.
Yeah, that's a renovation we did last year. So that picture's mid renovation. So it's growing in now. It's filling in, but that whole area. Yeah, kids are on there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They don't leave till probably 11 o'clock at night, like Chris was saying.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So,
and that's really one of the key conversations that I have with organizations that are universities, any sort of public site that has high use cases, or high traffic, I guess, is that amount of time that it takes to deliver all the necessary irrigation. It's always a problem, and having the mathematically shortest runtime, like OptiFlow is striving at, really makes that a key point of management. I like that. Dave, I'm looking to you.
I just, as you're zooming in right there, you can see what I really like. I mean, I'm a visual person, but you see those purple squares, and I love that you can click on that and it will show you, it takes you to the hydraulic tree. It tells you, what that flow zone is, how big it is.
So they're interconnected, right? When I click on a flow zone, it takes me right into the hydraulic tree and shows me where that is.
Yeah. There's a couple places on campus that we've had a little too much fun naming some flow zones, and so I have to figure out what they are. So clicking on it is like, oh yeah,
I remember now.
Narnia to Middle Earth. I like that one.
Yeah. I'm still not exactly sure what that one is, but Chris schedules that area, so that's his problem to deal with.
That is awesome.
So just going back to our sites real quick, we've kind of chosen to. Our sites are organized by pump station for the most part. So in Upper East is one of our pump stations. Timpanogos is a pump station. That lets us kind of diversify a little bit, or, we can see where the big chunk of water is coming onto campus, so that, they're at the pump where we've got the most water volume. We can control that a lot easier so that we're not draining those lines like Chris was saying. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I love it. I wanted to understand what the difference between these sites is, how you kind of decided to break it all down, and it's all by source, right? It's all by pump station.
It is. So that Brigham Young University site, a controller goes onto that site if that whole controller is on culinary water.
Okay.
So that's a lot of, sites that don't have secondary water. It's all culinary. We've put them under there. Other than that, some of them are physically different sites, like that Missionary Training Center, the Provo Temple, are sites that we manage, but we don't necessarily own. We're not the primary landowner there.
Okay.
But other than that, all of campus, we've got 4 different pump stations that are bringing water onto campus that we manage as different sites.
Something I want to just highlight here, because it's the advanced training. What we see with this Missionary Training Center is it's set up as a site, but I don't have any OptiFlow controllers on that site, right? So you can see it on this list, but we couldn't run OptiFlow because none of the controllers out there are running the OptiFlow specialized firmware.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we just haven't had the chance to get in there and update those as-built and see what our line sizes are and build that hydraulic tree yet.
And so until then, you're just running WeatherTRAK the way most people run it, without OptiFlow, right?
Yeah. And Chris does that, but everything's still alive, so he must be doing it right.
You must be doing it right. That is awesome. All right, gentlemen, what I wanted to hear from you is ways that OptiFlow provided a great solution for a problem that you're having. We've covered a bunch. We've covered sources. We've covered water windows. We've covered high traffic. Before we close out, I just want to open up the mic and see if there's any stories that I'm missing. So, Dave, I'm going to start with you.
Go ahead.
All right. Really, for me, like we saw at the Missionary Training Center, that's not OptiFlow, WeatherTRAK works awesome. When we upgrade to OptiFlow, even without flow meters, it saved us water window time. We saw a water savings. It was great. And now as we're adding flow meters and going to a metered flow, we're finding that our water windows are dropping and we're saving even more water. So it's just another degree of awesomeness, I guess, that, the OptiFlow has really helped us. It makes us look good.
I'd be
OptiFlow
super
does all the
interested
work,
to know. Like, you have to, if you know the savings that happens when you start to measure that principle that I always tout, you can't manage what you don't measure. It's hard for me to tie that to an actual savings, right? There is some, but I can't really tangibly touch it. I would love to hear if you guys get statistics on what that saves you and how much we're saving at each step of the process. That's water nerd gold right there.
It is. That's the struggle. Before WeatherTRAK, we didn't have a lot of data on what we were using. We were just kind of doing it. The big thing that I've seen is the drop in water window. And I would say that, like, the stuff I schedule, I'm able to get through my water cycle probably 30% faster now that we've gone to OptiFlow. And so that, that transfers into water savings, not just time. It's on both sides of that. So it's been incredible. And, I'm seeing it drop even more as we get flow meters coming online and using those. So
love it. That's awesome. Chris, any more stories for me?
Yeah, so the big thing for me is on this upper east station is that I have 4 pumps in there. So the 4 pumps will run up to 5,000 gallons a minute. But what I've done on that 20-inch main line is to try. So we used to run like 3 of those pumps at one time, but with the access to OptiFlow, is I can tack that flow down, and I'm trying to run max 2 pumps during the night. And so I can maximize that water window, but I can also only run those 2 pumps. So I'm just maximizing those. And then I have the other 2 pumps in case, one goes down. But I can use that to really maximize the pump efficiency and then the flow that I'm putting out there.
Yeah, pump efficiency, pump time, right?
That's
The
right.
pump wear and tear. That's their deliverable savings right there. Is if you can extend the life of those pumps, that's a huge savings.
Yeah, and so I'm maximizing that, and like I talked about before, is you're not having these spikes, so you're not having where you're running tons of flow from like 10 to 2, trying to get all that water out there, but you can maximize that flow, throughout your water window. So if you're going to put 500 gallons a minute out there, you can do it from, 7 until 7 in the morning. And so you're putting out that flow constantly at a given rate, instead of having all these spikes where you're spiking the flow at certain times. Yeah, a lot of
and ramping up the pump and letting it down and ramping it up and letting it down, right? You're gonna have a nice even pump curve, and it reduces the wear and tear on that pump.
Exactly. And a lot of times at night, like if I have a pressure drop on the canal, then I'll get an alarm from the pump station, and it will want to shut down and then reboot. And if I get that alarm, what I'll do is I'll go in there and pause all my controllers and shut them down. And then I can slowly bring those controllers online a few at a time. And then I can actually get to the point where I can actually get most of those controllers back online and get the water out there that I need.
That's awesome.
And so, and another thing on OptiFlow is on the app, you can actually run multiple stations at a time. So if you don't have OptiFlow and you're just using, your controller as a unit just for programming your stations, with OptiFlow, you can run up to 9 stations at a time.
Manually, right? We're talking about manual, either testing the system or winterizing the system as we do in our neck of the woods, right?
That's right. And so you can run those multiple stations.
Yeah, I've seen that as a huge advantage to OptiFlow. That is the selling point for some folks, is they just want to be able to run more than one station manually. And that is exclusively a feature of OptiFlow.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Chris, Joe Jackson, close us out. Take us home, buddy. Anything to close us out with?
I think we've seen today the complexity that OptiFlow will handle. Ben alluded to the fact that a lot of his trainings have been on the simplicity of OptiFlow, which is very, very true. It is very simple to set up and run, especially single point of connection, single controller, multiple controllers, single point of connection, multiple point of connections, multiple controllers. There's a lot of different scenarios, and it's not hard. Your hydraulics are going to, your pipes that deliver the water are going to stay the same size in the ground. As long as you understand what they have and what your zones need, you'll be able to optimize that. And whether you have a small water window that you have to get that watering done, or if you do like Chris has done, where he looks at his available water window and then he maximizes the efficiency across the whole window, that choice is yours on how you're managing your site. What matters, though, is that OptiFlow gives you these tools, and it continues to solve problems, as we've seen today on how BYU has done such a great job of utilizing it and its tools.
Wow, you closed us out. That was a perfect close. I have nothing to build on that other than to say, you guys are awesome. Thanks for playing along today. So appreciate. Let me, I am going to give you over the mic for final word, but before I do that, I have to tout what I've got next. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Ooh, just kidding. I got to show it off. Share screen. So up next, so what you are seeing this week is the first new content of 2023. I'm sorry for that, by the way. But since COVID is over and real life has resumed, I've seen an uptick in live training, and I'm out and about. So we have taken our planned weekly Smart Water Wednesday, and we are going to add new content instead of every week, once a month. But I promise we're going to make it all valuable just like this. And next month, on the final final Wednesday of every month, we'll have new content. Next month's content will be a deep dive on the controller hardware. Some of the feedback that we got from our listeners was that we never look at the controllers themselves. And so we're going to do a deep dive on the boards and the lights and the wires and everything you see with the WeatherTRAK controllers, and just kind of get to know the hardware a little bit better. I, as my co-host, will have our escalations manager, or our engineering liaison, or I don't know what he's called these days, but my friend Jonathan Heredia is a WeatherTRAK nerd just like me. And we are going to host TJ Radin, who is a great Site One Green Tech manager in California. And he's a real field guy, so he's a nuts and bolts kind of dude. So I think that will be super valuable. Until then, thank you all for tuning in and seeing the new content. I hope it was valuable for you. Again, check out the basic OptiFlow. If you have OptiFlow questions, let us know. And I will hand it off to my co-host and then special guest to say one last goodbye. Joe, you want to start us?
Yeah, just want to say thanks to Ben for putting this together, and thank Chris and Dave for taking the time as they prepare for an upcoming snow day to share their OptiFlow success on campus there. And just say again that OptiFlow has helped solve so many problems for my customers as I work through complex and basic irrigation scenarios. It's a great tool that can provide additional options as you are understanding and wanting to better manage your sites.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dave,
I,
have anybody say goodbye to?
Ben, I always have to say goodbye to you. You, Joe, also. OptiFlow is great, but it's not much without the people. And Joe and Ben, just amazing resources, and really appreciate what you do. Glad to be working with you. So
glad to be working with you. Thank you for that. Chris, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I would just agree with the people we're working with. The customer support has been amazing. I mean, we couldn't have done this without Joe, without Ben, without HydroPoint, and the service that they provide. They're always have a listening ear, and they'll always look for suggestions and opportunities to improve what they have. And that's what it's built upon. It's built upon the users, and they're always listening to the users so that they can input that into the technology. And that's what makes WeatherTRAK amazing. So
that's awesome. And for me, thank you all. We'll see you again next time. Have a good week, everyone.